Mind of an anorexic. Things aren't the way they were before. I don't even recognize myself anymore. The mirror lies. You can see the pain and suffering deep in my eyes. The hunger pain hurts, but starvation works. Surviving on 500 calories a day, people tell me my body is wasting away. I'm trying to be the thinnest one of all. I don't want to die, but my body feels so dry. I feel so empty and so incomplete. I don't know how I manage to stay on my feet. Stupid calorie counts are going off in my head, and when I just don't want to deal with it, I go directly to bed. Then I start to wonder, is it worth it? Is trying to be the thinnest worth all of this? The pain, the suffering? Somebody, please help me. I'm trying to escape, and I feels like I'm constantly being raped. I'm an innocent victim. What did I do to deserve this? Sabrina.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. You're listening to Vision Quest. I'm Harvey Rothman, your host, and you are listening to a poem by my guest tonight, Dr. Debbi Giaramita. Good evening, Debbie.
Good evening.
It is a pleasure to have you here tonight.
It's a pleasure to be here.
And ladies and gentlemen, tonight we are going to, obviously, as we promoted, be talking about eating disorders. And I just want you all to know that if you want to call in, you have a question or a comment, feel free. The phone number here is 609-800-1003. Repeating that, 609-800-1003. If you want to email me, I will get it and pose the question. And you can email me at Harvey Rothman in one word, .visionquest@yahoo.com. Once again, Harvey Rothman in one word, .visionquest in one word, @yahoo.com. Okay. Before we start, or as we start, I'm going to play you a tape of something from 1983.
And the Eyewitness News team. Good evening, everybody. Here is the latest tonight at 5 o'clock. She left us all too soon. Karen Carpenter, whose soft and mellow voice was known to millions, died at a hospital in Downey this morning of cardiac arrest. Karen and her brother Richard, as the Carpenters, soared to success in the 1970s, putting romance back into popular music. All told, they sold some 60 million albums. Carpenter rushed to Downey Community Hospital this morning by paramedics after collapsing at her parents' home nearby. All efforts to save her failed. She was pronounced dead this morning at 9:51. Carpenter was the victim of anorexia.
Okay, so folks, that was the announcement of Karen Carpenter's death in 1983, a victim of anorexia. And apparently, according to the autopsy, which I said I wasn't going to talk about, Karen's ultimate death was a cardiac arrest caused by overuse of ipecac syrup, which is something that's used to induce vomiting in the event of toxic poisoning. And Karen basically used it on a regular basis. And what that did was wear away at her heart muscle, so that even as she was recovering from anorexia, her heart just gave out and couldn't take it anymore. Karen Carpenter's velvet voice charmed millions in the 1970s, but behind the wholesome image, she was in turmoil. Desperate to look slim on stage, and above all, desperate to please the domineering mother who preferred her brother, she became the first celebrity victim of anorexia nervosa. In 1996, journalist Rob Harburger powerfully summed up Karen Carpenter's tribulations in a New York Times Magazine feature, and I quote, "If anorexia has classically been defined as a young woman's struggle for control, then Karen was a prime candidate for the two things she valued most in the world. Her voice and her mother's love were exclusively the property of her brother Richard. At least she would control the size of her own body, and control it she did. By September 1975, her weight fell to, I can't read this, it looks like 7 pounds or 41 kilograms, whatever that comes out to. So that was our first national experience with anorexia. So, Debbie, tell us about your experience, your personal experience with anorexia.
Okay. I was a model in the 80s and became anorexic very quickly, knowing that the thinner you were, the better off you were, the more jobs you were able to grab onto. And so my life became all about going to the gym a couple of times a day, working out constantly, on a diet of miso soup and sprouts that I grew on my window ledge, and still feeling, no matter what weight I was, that I was still fat. So body dysmorphia really began shortly after I became anorexic. Mm-hmm. And from that point on, no matter what anybody told me, even though people were saying, you just got so thin, and I'm 5'10". My lowest weight was 116 pounds, and Harvey, I showed you a few of those pictures.
I saw those.
It's quite disturbing. Even though I was getting so many jobs from being that thin, psychologically and emotionally, I really was falling apart.
Yeah, and we can't show this to the viewers, obviously, but I could see your hip bone protruding, and your ribs, and the thin arms at the time.
Right.
From way back then. And, obviously you recovered.
Yes.
And you went on to get your PhD in psychology. Mm-hmm. And just to give folks a background on you, which I forgot to do a minute ago, you got your PhD from Cornerstone University, which is a faith-based university. Mm-hmm. You are currently an adjunct professor of psychology at the College of Staten Island and at St. John's University, where you teach how many classes?
I'm teaching
too many, I know.
Yeah, 3. I'm teaching 3 classes at the College of Staten Island and 2 at St. John's University.
And you work at Silver Lake Support Services in Staten Island as a substance abuse counselor?
Yes.
Okay. Mm-hmm. So you've got certainly got the background to be helping people with this stuff. Mm-hmm. So tell us about the lifestyle of a model. Let's start there. Okay,
well, you call your agent in the morning, and the agent gives you a list of places. Well, I don't know what happens now, but that's how it was then. Now we have the internet. But you call your agent, they give you a list of places to go, and you would go on what was called go-sees, and you can go on about 10 in a day, and maybe you would get 1 or 2 jobs from those 10 interviews. Mm. But there was a lot of scrutinizing. I mean, you would go in there, and one interview, they would tell you that you were too heavy, and then another one would say you were too thin, and one would say you need to do something with your jawline and get some surgery, and the next one would say, it was just, they just were never satisfied.
So it was all about what's wrong with you.
Yeah, it was all about what was wrong with you.
As opposed to what's right with you.
Mm-hmm, exactly. And so it was, you had to really be thick-skinned, and I had very strong support from my husband and my faith. I was very strong with my faith, so I got through it. But little did I know, I developed an illness that was slowly tearing me apart.
And that was anorexia.
Yes.
And how did that illness affect you? In what way?
Well, I think, the physiological effects, of course, and the social factors, because, family members were constantly telling me that I needed to eat. They were worried about me. And what would happen with that was that I just thought they didn't want me to enjoy being thin. I just was so irrational about it.
It was their fault.
I'm thin, and just get over it. I look great, and that's what they were telling me. The thinner I was, the better off I was in terms of my career in modeling. And, finally it just got to the point where I was fainting and collapsing, and my blood pressure was very low. And I was hospitalized once, and they couldn't figure out what was wrong with me. So. Mm-hmm.
So there seems to be a discrepancy frequently the way we see ourselves and the way other people see us.
Yes. Anorexics have a tendency to have body dysmorphia. When they look in the mirror, they see a totally different image.
Right. They don't see reality.
They don't see reality.
Wow.
And that's why it's hard to get them on track, because they don't think there's anything wrong with them. They think everybody else is having an unrealistic problem going on in their heads. So it's and families, just get totally torn apart watching their children die.
Now, I realize that to a large extent, anorexia is the result of a cultural phenomenon. Be thin.
Yes.
Models, thin. People on TV, thin. You got to stay thin, otherwise you're unattractive.
Right. And in our patriarchal society, men contribute a lot to that by actually, most men will say they would rather be with someone who's really thin. And that's a message that's sent.
Generally speaking, yeah. And where are they getting it from? They're getting it from Hollywood and from TV.
Exactly, exactly.
So
exactly.
Everybody's being fed the same line of BS from the same place.
Yes.
Hollywood and Madison Avenue. We're all getting the same stuff. But, so I mean, that's obviously, the culture, that's one cause. But what are the other causes, the deeper causes of anorexia? And let me rephrase that question, being the lawyer that I am. What are the psychological components behind the disease?
Well, most times what you'll find that there's an emptiness involved in that person's life. And I do find that a lot of the young women that I work with have had issues with their fathers. And it could be whether or not a father says something about their weight, or even a mother who has issues with her weight. I have one client in particular that I'm thinking about who saw her grandmother experience bulimia, just throwing up in the sink after she would eat, and her mother who became a devout vegetarian and would starve herself if she had just a little bit too much on her plate of vegetables. And so the daughter grew up seeing this, and she developed binge eating disorder. So, it's an addictive disorder.
Yeah, we'll get to that in a few minutes.
Yeah. Psychological addictions can come out in so many different forms. People don't realize that.
So, eating disorders are a form of addiction?
Yes, they are.
Okay, and just to go through them quickly. So, from anorexia, I guess the next one on the DSM would be bulimia?
Yes. And bulimia is different in that there's no physiological visible symptoms. And so it's a very sneaky disorder, because people can go to the doctor and their weight is normal and everything seems normal. And there can be, your body could be wreaking havoc inside, because throwing up can cause you to damage your esophagus. And you can have a tear in your esophagus, and there can be so many damaging results from the behaviors. Laxatives. There's so many things that can happen with that, and it could be deadly. Actually, I've had girls that tell me that they went on to take 2 or 3 boxes of laxatives at once. Mothers would find empty boxes by the stack, fulls in their drawers, hiding them.
That's horrible.
Yeah, and they're not realizing that this could lead to death. They just don't process that.
Yeah, and then with the throwing up again, there's the whole eating with the heart muscle, like
Yes.
Karen.
Exactly.
So,
Exactly.
It's horrible.
Yes. And also it interrupts, with anorexia, it interrupts the normal development, because they're eating less, and there could be brain shrinkage. There's a lot of things. With bulimia, there's a lot of volatile things that happen to your body when you're over-exercising. I mean, I'm talking people who are bulimic will go to the gym, and I've seen girls in the gym 2-3 times a day and exercise excessively, or the laxatives, or the vomiting, inducing vomiting. So there's a lot of different forms.
So anorexia is deliberately not eating. Bulimia is the purging.
Exactly. It's binging and purging. So
it's a combination.
So what happens is, and it differs from binge eating disorder. What this happens with bulimia is that there is a cycle of shame and guilt, because these women will tell me that they were in the supermarket and somebody caught them with a shopping cart filled with bags and bags of potato chips and cakes and cookies and fries and everything else they can get their hands on. And this is one sitting. And you would never know it. The girls that come into me are absolutely looking fit. They